Hello there, and welcome to the latest edition of Unscripted. I'm your host, Jack White. Today we don't have any special guests, but we're working on getting a few special episodes released next week. Some people that have a lot of things to say, and there will be a lot of fantastic takes and moments come along in the future of the show. So hopefully you guys, when you've seen this video, subscribe, like the video up, and stick around because we got a lot of awesome content coming up. I'll say this, I'm not going to reveal anything, but I will say that the rage bait that you experienced last episode, that you witnessed last episode, is going to be brought in tenfold here. It's going to be just absolutely insane. I know these guys, the people that want to come on, and if, by the way, if you're watching, you want to come on, just contact me and we can make it happen. But just be prepared for that because we got an awesome couple weeks ahead of us in terms of episodes being released. But, it's a solo mission today, and I had some things I wanted to talk about. So nothing too flashy, but, you always got to address the news in the media, in the sports world, and make sure you're staying current. So that's what we're going to do today. First thing I want to talk about was the NBA draft last night. And I just had a quick note because this isn't like the NFL draft where you need to do all these crazy mock drafts and there's these falls like Shedeur Sanders falling to 144 and all these crazy picks, and there's not 7 rounds, there's only 2 rounds, only 59 picks, so it's not really it's not really as important as the NFL draft. But in that regard, I'll just take you through 5 things that I was thinking about when witnessing the draft. And the first one was obviously Cooper Flag goes number 1. That's not a surprise. He's an outstanding player. Led Duke to the Final Four, and which is someplace that they hadn't been for a couple of years. And he was one of the best Duke freshmen since Zion Williamson, that 2019 season where Duke made that fantastic run. And I mean, they had 2 comparable seasons. Maybe Zion was a bit better, a bit more explosive, but in the same breath, Cooper Flag is one of those picks like Victor Wembanyama was a couple years ago, where he's undeniably going to go number 1, and he's a franchise-changing player, which in the NBA, that really doesn't happen, past the first 3 picks, maybe 4 picks. And he's a certifiable franchise-changing player, and the Mavs just got even more size. They just re-signed Daniel Gafford. They got Lively on the roster. They got AD. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with next season, and Cooper Flag added to that. Ace Bailey sifts to number 5. So in the media, there'd been a lot of rumors about Ace Bailey falling to maybe number 6 to the Wizards, and that was predicated based on the fact that he was choosing not to work out for the teams like the Jazz, who ended up selecting him. And because of that fact, and because teams viewed that as kind of a slight towards them, it's kind of like a Shedeur Sanders type of character issue, although he obviously didn't fall nearly as much as Sanders did. But that was just something of note, and he ended up going at number 5 to the Jazz. And I will say, maybe he didn't look happy going to the Jazz, but I still think it's a solid franchise, and maybe he can be a franchise cornerstone there. The Wizards, hometown Wizards, they grabbed their Jordan Poole replacement as he's heading to New Orleans in exchange for C.J. McCollum. They grabbed his replacement and Trey Johnson, the guard out of Texas. An outstanding guard, had an outstanding year, and I think it's a great pick. And I know the fans in D.C. here really want to see some success, any type of growth within the franchise, and I actually am confident that Johnson can bring that. So it was the best pick they could have made at that position. The Grizzlies took Yang Hansen out of the stands. So he wasn't actually invited to the NBA draft because most mocks had him going in the second round, like late second round. And for whatever reason, the Grizzlies, they already have bigs, they already have Zach Edey, but they grabbed the center out of China, Yang Hansen, who was watching the draft in the stands, and when he got his name called, he stood up nonchalantly like he knew he was going to get picked there. And maybe he did, but the rest of us didn't, and that's what made it such a big surprise. But congratulations to him, and he goes to the Grizzlies at number 16. And my final note from the draft was Walter Clayton Jr., my personal favorite player. Watching college basketball this past year, watching him lead Florida to a natty, goes number 18 to the Jazz. So in my opinion, the Jazz actually won night 1 of the draft. You get Ace Bailey, who should have been top 3, right? And then you get Walter Clayton Jr., who I think is a very underrated player. And I saw those clutch shots. He was hitting in the Elite Eight, Final Four to put Florida ahead. And, I mean, this is a clutch player. This is a guy who, plays outside of his size. I mean, just look at his traditional size. He'll look like an undersized NBA player. But when you watch how he plays, he's shifty, and he can score. And he always gets to his spot. So I think that the Jazz definitely, if he doesn't pan out to be a star, he'll at least be a solid role player. And I think that the Jazz definitely won night one, and this is a win they've needed for quite a while because the last 2 years they've really been in a state of despair. So, transitioning to a topic that I'm finally excited to address, the NFL. And although it's only June, late June, it's never too late to start thinking about football. So with that in mind, I wanted to bring you guys today my top 5 storylines that I'm excited to follow during the season. So these are things that when it's week 1 or maybe it's the Hall of Fame game at the first week of August, and I turn on the TV, I'm like, here's what I'm excited to watch every time I'm locked in during the NFL season. So without further ado, let me take you through the list. All right, so here's my first one. It's going to be probably a no-brainer, and that is Aaron Rodgers and his fit in Pittsburgh. We saw that the Steelers didn't take a quarterback until Ohio State product Will Howard in the 6th round during the NFL draft, and we kind of thought that was based on really their intent to sign Aaron Rodgers. And whether people believed that as the right move or not, it was still done. It was still executed by the Pittsburgh front office. And I mean, in my opinion, I do think that the Steelers should have gone for someone like Shedeur Sanders, even if they didn't like his character much, because I think that he's an exceptional player. And I think that really Aaron Rodgers at 41 years old is not going to give you a lot mobility-wise. And we saw last year, threw a lot of interceptions, his off-platform throws, throwing on the run. It's not what it used to be. His accuracy isn't what it used to be. And I really think that in order to, unless Will Howard's their developmental project, but I really think that they needed to grab someone for the future there right away. They didn't do that. I guess maybe they think either Aaron Rodgers can lead them somewhere, maybe the second round of the playoffs finally. I don't think we've seen that in maybe 10, 12 years. Or maybe Will Howard's the guy. Maybe they trade for another guy. They didn't want to re-sign Justin Fields, who would be in the perfect developmental project at only 25 years at the time. And their contract would not have been expensive at all. So I do think they made some mistakes here. And it is interesting to see, can Aaron Rodgers make up maybe for lack of offensive weapons depth? I mean, yes, sure, they signed DK Metcalf, but they also traded away George Pickens, and the offensive line is still shaky. So it's not the Detroit Lions offensive line. So that's something to watch there. Number 2, still with QB rooms, the Browns QB rotation as the season goes on. Coming at this point in time, the reports are that Shedeur Sanders is the number 4 quarterback on the Browns depth chart, which I think is ludicrous. I even found it ludicrous that they took Dylan Gabriel out of Oregon 2 rounds prior. 2 rounds prior till taking Shedeur Sanders. And I mean, the fact that he started camp over him, and I've seen footage of both Gabriel and Sanders. I've seen, kind of their stats from the OTAs, the mini camps, and Shedeur Sanders has passed a lot better than Dylan Gabriel, and he's looked a lot better than Dylan Gabriel. So I'm really not sure why they're making him, kind of at the back, because your QB rotation is what? I mean, with Deshaun Watson out, who wasn't nearly that good to begin with playing for you guys. You have Joe Flacco, who's 40 by now, and who wasn't very good last season. You have Kenny Pickett, who essentially lost one of the only 2 games in the regular season for the Eagles by himself. And you have, I don't know, who do you have? So you have those guys. And not only do you have them, but you also took a quarterback before Sanders. So you have 4 quarterbacks on the roster, 5 if you count Deshaun Watson on IL. And really, it's flooded. And, I mean, to me, there's only one clear answer. It's Shedeur Sanders. If you watch his tape in college, you would know that the way he's able to stand in the pocket and deliver throws that are off schedule, as Joe Klatt would like to put it. What I mean by that is throws that really aren't part of those initial reads that when you make when the pocket's breaking down and there was some issue maybe with the receiver separation or maybe it's late in the game and you need some magic. He's been great with those. He led the country in accuracy with 74% completion percentage. And, I mean, whatever you say about his character, or his brazenness or the fact that he dropped a song, him flexing the watch on all of his opponents, I still think that he was the second best quarterback in the draft behind Cam Ward. I'm shocked that Dylan Gabriel went before him. I'm shocked that even Tyler Shook, taken by the Saints in the second round, went before him because to me, Shedeur Sanders is a hell of a lot more talented than all those players. So it's interesting to see. Will Shedeur Sanders earn the job? Will he struggle and not earn the job? And if he doesn't earn the job, who will? Because I guarantee you, none of these quarterbacks are leading the Browns anywhere. They might just end up in a top 3 pick selection situation like they were this past year. So we'll see how that goes. Number 3, did the Patriots do enough to make the playoffs? Coming off another 4-13 season for the second time, the Patriots fired Gerard Mayo and replaced him with Mike Vrabel and essentially revamped the whole staff. You know, brought back Josh McDaniels to be the OC, and really they've just upgraded everywhere. Signed Stephon Diggs, signed a bunch of defensive players like Carlton Davis, Harold Landry from the Titans, and it was really great to see them, you know, kind of address everything that went wrong and not be passive about the back-to-back disappointing seasons. And the great thing about the Patriots is that they already know who their guy is, and that's Drake May. And he showed enough potential last season to ensure that he's the guy going forward. So with that in mind, they were able to address the draft for position players and shoring up the offensive line. That's what they did by taking Will Campbell. They ended up taking center from Georgia after that at the 4th round. Also taking Kyle Williams out of Washington, wide receiver in the 3rd round. So they've made some upgrades on both sides of the ball. The questions I still have are, is there enough offensive line depth and wide receiver depth to really help them win those games that could go either way? And really we saw in 2021 when the Patriots went 10-7 with Mac Jones and still didn't have a great offensive line or receiver core that, I mean, all it takes is a great defense and, you know, maybe one guy and a good quarterback and a good scheme. That was when Josh McDaniels was still there and Bill Belichick was still there. So I think with great coaching and Josh McDaniels being back and hopefully some skill position player upgrades, I do think the Patriots can make the playoffs, but we'll see. We'll see how the season plays out. At number 4, we have, will we see Jalen Milroe at all this year? And I'd say that because I am very hesitant in banking on Sam Darnold being good this year. And part of that, I mean, shamefully, I will admit, I do kind of fall into that trap of like reading those Instagram posts about the quarterbacks having bad training camps and throwing a bunch of interceptions. But it does mean something. It's not meaningless. Those camps aren't meaningless. Those are live reps against NFL players. And those mean something. And he's reportedly been very bad and really inconsistent within those camps so far. So, and I'm told Jalen Milroe's looked like he's made a lot of progress. And we all know who has the more potential, like higher ceiling. And really, it's going to be interesting to see how Sam Darnold goes from the Kevin O'Connell system with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison at his disposal to a washed-up Cooper Kupp and Jackson Smith-Njigba, who I think is a top 15 receiver in the NFL. Don't get me wrong. But I also think that they have a way worse offensive line and way worse, you know, kind of scheme and position players around him than Minnesota did. So, and when you don't really have the defense that Minnesota did to back them up, how are you going to respond? And I think Sam Darnold is kind of a system player. And, I mean, he was, if you put him on the 49ers, like, right now, and, I mean, I think it'd be great because of that, because of that Kyle Shanahan system. Like we've seen Brock Purdy. Do I think Brock Purdy's assistant quarterback? No. That's a topic for another day. I'm really impressed with this tape. But we'll address that later. So, will we see Jalen Milroe if Sam Darnold stinks? And finally, the question we've been asking for 4 years now, going on a 5th year, is, does Kyle Pitts finally take the leap? We saw his rookie year, 1,000 yards, 7+ touchdowns. But these past couple of years have been really, really disappointing. And I don't know what to say, because this guy is extremely talented. Yes, you could point to the quarterback position. You've had Desmond Ridder, Taylor Heineke, and a washed-up Kirk Cousins in there. You've had poor offensive line play. But the skill position guys are there. You got Darnell Mooney, Drake London. You got great running backs in Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. And I think they're kind of out of excuses at this point. So hopefully Arthur Smith, get your act together and realize what the stud you have, because if he doesn't pan out, then they're just going to heads will roll in Atlanta. And I'm rooting for him. I really think he's a great player, and I really just want to see him succeed. Hopefully Michael Penix can start throwing those deep balls like he did at Washington to Kyle Pitts. So I'll transition now to the questions you guys asked. And I'm extremely happy, and I just want to thank you guys all for, participating in those Instagram stories and replying to me, and, giving me your thoughts on, like, in person and, online on the podcast. And I appreciate you guys watching and commenting and subscribing, and, it means a lot. And I appreciate your most recent round of questions. Keep this up. I love answering these. It's one of my favorite, parts of this podcast. Like, the whole thing is just answering the questions you guys have, and hopefully giving you the analysis that you want. So, with that being said, I took the top 3 questions from this past week. And without further ado, here we go. The first question is, what are your thoughts on the KD trade? So, I do really like it. I will say the Rockets did fleece the Suns a bit, as the Suns keep getting fleeced in these star player trades, because they're able to keep role players like Tari Eason, Jabari Smith, and, Amen Thompson. Maybe he can blossom into a star, but they kept those kind of young guys that showed a lot of potential, were instrumental in that playoff run. They did re-sign Fred VanVleet, who was inconsistent in the playoffs, but when he was on, he was on. And I think if he can have a good season, I think he can really be the point guard the team needs. So now the Rockets finally had their consistent number one option. And that was a point of discussion during the playoffs against the Warriors, where Jalen Green was in single digits most of the series, had that 138-point game, and then the rest of the series was non-existent. And we were all talking about how if the Rockets wanted to go farther in the playoffs, they needed someone they could go to for a bucket. And even though Jalen Green was the most talented player on that team, they couldn't really do that because of his inconsistency. So they have KD, almost 50-49 splits. Again, he seems to be doing this every year. 27 points per game, but the Suns had a very quiet but still outstanding year. I really enjoyed watching him play. And even though the Suns stunk, that wasn't his fault. He was carrying that team. And if he plays like that, the Rockets are a serious threat. They are a serious threat. Their role players, their bench is great. And if Reed Shepherd, the 3rd pick in the draft a year ago, can develop into that starting shooting guard role to replace Jalen Green, that would be huge. Absolutely huge. I think he's a very talented player. I think it's possible. And I think the Rockets can really break out and maybe make that next step. So I love it. I think it's a great fit. And I'm really happy to see it. Number 2. Is the increase of brain rot related to the death of intellect and the rise of pseudo-intellectualism? So before I address this, and I do have some thoughts on it, I had to look it up. And pseudo-intellectualism refers to individuals who strive to appear knowledgeable and intelligent, but lack genuine understanding or depth in their knowledge. So, what are we talking about here? Well, it's people with bravado and charisma, who like to speak on every topic they can think of, that, you know, people, like when people ask them questions, they give endless rants and spiels and go on and on and on. But really it stems from the fact that they're insecure about their lack of knowledge. So they want to appear knowledgeable to other people. So the answer of this the answer to this question is yes. And I would actually point to Stephen A. Smith. And I'm not saying he's not a smart guy, and I'm not saying he doesn't know stuff, but if you watch First Take, and I know I've alluded to, you know, First Take a bunch, and it's really like one of my main inspirations for this podcast because I love watching that show. But if you look at Stephen A. Smith, not even just on First Take, but his own show on NBA Countdown, you'll see that whenever they talk about something that's not basketball, or even if it is basketball, like the most recently he made a take about how LeBron James has been a nightmare for NBA front offices, which couldn't be farther from the truth. I totally disagree with that. I think he's way offline there. You find that he just says a lot of words. He says a lot of words, doesn't have a lot of stats to back it up. And he uses his loud voice, his, you know, kind of just like, it's that shock value. That shock value when you hear him talk and the way you hear him, you know, articulate his arguments, that it's just convincing. So he could say the most ridiculous thing and it would sound convincing just because of the way he says it. But if you really dive into what he says, a lot of time he really says stuff that's incorrect or kind of off base, or not even like entirely true. You know, maybe he gets the facts wrong all the time. You could tell like he's not really prepared for anything that's not basketball. So I would say, like in the first part of this answer to that question, yes, this does exist in society, because I do think that, look at it, ESPN fired hundreds of employees just so they could pay Stephen A. Smith $20 million a year. And for what? Because he only knows, like, is actually certifiably knowledgeable in one specific sport and just is flamboyant in all the rest. I mean, that's definitely a rise of pseudo-intellectualism. And the other famous example is Donald Trump. I mean, 4/5 of the stuff that comes out of his mouth is just a lie. And whether it was running for his campaign or when he was in office the first time, whether it was running when he was running in 2016, or whether it's this very second, if he's talking, it is probably a lie and not based in fact whatsoever. But the reason he has so many supporters is because of, you know, like I said before, the charisma, the way he addresses his followers. He creates that fear factor where it's like, if you don't listen to me, then something bad's going to happen. And like, I'm the only one that can save you. But he doesn't know anything about anything. And I mean, I remember this one clip a couple years ago where he was talking about like airport maintenance in the 1700s. And how did George Washington, you know, fly in and out of Reagan International in the 1700s or something like that. And, you know, it's just stuff like that. It's just stuff like that. So we do see it in some of the most prominent figures in society. Stephen A. Smith is the frontline header of ESPN, and he just talks and talks and talks, and with not a lot of substance behind it, and look where he is now. Same with Donald Trump, the president of the United States for the second term, and based entirely on lies. That's all I need to say. That's all I need to say. So the answer to that question is yes. It's all tied in. We find brain rot enjoyable. Going back to that death of intellect thing, when you follow people like Smith and Trump, that's really not using your brain for yourself. That's trusting the word of other people who are purposefully trying to convince you that they know what they're talking about, even though they don't. And because at this point in time, because people are so susceptible, you know, to, you know, kind of misinformation like this, it really kind of encapsulates the fact that in society anymore, we really don't have to put a lot of effort into a product to make it entertaining, or, you know, a product that people want to go see, to go purchase, to go indulge themselves in. And I mean, brain rot, just look at brain rot. I mean, you can look at Italian brain rot. It doesn't even matter what type of brain rot. It's there. So the answer to that question is yes. And I mean, obviously I kind of briefly covered it here, but just if you want to read more, just go read CNN every day, NBC News. They got it covered. So the last question I have for today, transitioning back to more sports-related content, is why are the Thunder such good sources of rage bait? And it's a complicated question. But my take on it is that because their brand of basketball is so unenjoyable to watch, it's so unenjoyable to watch, that makes calling their success kind of like basketball fans, like the old heads, the people who watched the MJ Bulls, Dirk and the Mavs win the finals, LeBron and the Heat, the Warriors with KD, right? Like these classic teams. They're nowhere near as entertaining that. And that's actually a representation of the NBA, because the NBA is extremely bland now. And I generally, I was watching a Dodgers game over Game 6 of the NBA Finals because I just didn't care. It's been going on for the past couple of years now, but maybe it's a matter of marketing, the All-Star game becoming, unimportant. Some of the biggest figures in the sport coming to the end of their careers, and kind of like these new teams that don't have as much, kind of history as maybe the Bulls or Warriors or Lakers or Celtics do, kind of rising to the spotlight, like the Nuggets or the Thunder. I mean, for whatever reason, the NBA is just not as interesting as it used to be. And because of that fact, people don't want to acknowledge, the reality that the Thunder are actually one of the great teams in NBA history. And they actually they have the highest defense this past season. They were 68-14. They won the NBA Finals. Shea put up 33 points a game, and he won Eastern Conference Finals MVP, Finals MVP, and the regular season MVP, and the title. And they also had the best defensive rating in NBA history. And I go on my sports news websites, Fox Sports, ESPN, where do you have it? And it's like, in the past 7 years, who are the best champions? And they rank the Thunder like number 6 or number 7. I'll let you guys do that what you will. But I think that for the team with the best defensive rating in NBA history, I don't think that's an appropriate placement, especially when we had and I'm going to say that Warriors team was not very as strong, nearly as strong as the Thunder. Same with the Bucks. So I think that it's kind of biased by the poor state of the NBA today. I mean, if you look at going back to the MJ Bulls and the KD Warriors, those teams were dominant during the peaks of NBA consumption, when the NBA product was at its best and the most people were consuming it and enjoying it. That is when these classic teams, the teams that got documentaries, The Last Dance, that's when they were popular, because of that people idolized those sports teams. And even though the Thunder, they're kind of rival, they're not necessarily on the same level, but they're maybe a tier and a half below those teams. And they just won the NBA championship. Nobody wants to acknowledge it, that they were great, just because of how uninteresting the NBA was this year. And that's why the Thunder are such sources of rage bait, because nobody wants to acknowledge that they're good, because the NBA as a whole is uninteresting to watch. It is not a good product right now. So that's my take on it. Thank you guys so much again for the questions. Hopefully I get a lot of great new ones before this upcoming episode. I got a lot of great guest interviews you're going to want to see. So keep following the podcast, keep watching the videos, listen to the podcast on Spotify if you can. And I greatly appreciate your support so much. Thank you. And I will catch you guys in the next episode.